Mark, you get to pick. We're going to talk about clothing now.
Clothing.
You want to talk about everybody's favorite yoga wear retailer, Lululemon, or Under Armour first?
That's a good question. I guess we'll start with Lululemon. And again, I took a look back at the share prices a year ago. Lululemon's only up 2% since we probably last spoke about it.
Right.
And the conversation was always, the conversation for a long time with Lululemon was troubles with the management
Pilling.
for a little while. Pilling, for instance, was also a problem. A year ago or so, those problems had kind of been pushed to the side, and Lululemon was still doing what they usually do. And to their credit, revenues are up 15%, net income's up 11%. As of their last quarterly filings. They're still firing on all cylinders.
It does seem like operationally they're turning the ship finally.
Exactly, and that's very good. There's nothing wrong with that. My problem is that it's going to be tougher and tougher for Lululemon to sell these $80 capris and $110 hoodies.
Do you remember the company's gross margins?
Yeah.
It's like 50% gross margins.
And
that's
insane.
And
it's something I was going to mention that they've started guiding gross margins down over just very slowly. I think, last gross margins last quarter were something like 51.4%. They guided for gross margins to come down to 47%.
This year?
Yeah, this quarter. Year over year. And that's a small amount in the long scheme of things, I suppose. And like you said, 51, that's pretty good. But it's indicative to me that their gross margins are going to start to, at least in my mind, slowly come down as more and more competitors enter this market. A year ago, if we talked about athleisure or whatever the kids are calling it these days, we probably just talked about Lululemon, maybe Gap
The
with
Gap's
their
Athleta stores.
Yeah, sure.
And that was kind of it.
And
You're
that was kind of
absolutely
it,
right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if we're going to have a conversation about Lululemon, a lot of other companies have to enter that conversation. Nike is coming at the athleisure wear angle from the sports angle. Under Armour, which we're going to talk about in just a second. Same thing.
Just thinking, since we last did our last show together, mall in hometown in the Midwest, huge Under Armour store just opened up. Shoes, yoga pants, shirt. I mean, huge store. I'm like, oh man, well, there's only so many consumer dollars out there, so...
Well, that's true, but you got to admit, a lot of those consumer dollars are going to Under Armour right now. If you look at their last quarterly report, I mean, my God, it's, revenue growth of over 20% for the last 24 consecutive quarters. You can't deny they're doing something right over there. But again, Under Armour is almost in the same position as Lululemon. I think Lululemon is a little bit worse off because their niche is so much nichier in that it's not just leisure wear, it's also mainly women's leisure wear, whereas Under Armour can kind of expand out of its niche a little bit easier in my mind at least. But again, there's just so much competition coming into this market now where we're starting to see a lot of saturation. If you look at actually Under Armour's pricing over the last couple of quarters, Morgan Stanley analyst named Jay Soul pointed out in a report recently that Under Armour has seen declines in the average selling price of the company's apparel for the last 6 quarters, which again, it's almost like that Lululemon guiding down their gross margins just a little bit. Everyone's focused on the big numbers. The revenue is outstanding. The EPS is great. And sure, that's all fine. But there are little hints here that the saturation is starting to affect these companies. Under Armour's bringing prices down. Lululemon's gross margins are starting to get hit just a little bit. It's not going to, these businesses aren't going to collapse tomorrow by any stretch of the imagination. But again, when you have so many competitors coming in from every single angle into this market, whether it's low end with Walmart and Target or high end with Victoria's Secret or Tory Burch, Beyonce has her own athleisure wear line. For God's sake, people, Beyonce. I'm not a huge fan.
You know what she charges?
No, I don't. I'd have to check the price tag on everything in my closet. But I think both of these companies are pretty sound, but I think the market as a whole is starting to get really crowded.
Well, not only that, but Lululemon's having to go to different segments for growth. The best, fastest growing segment for Lululemon in the quarter they just reported was menswear.
Right.
So my question was, does anybody here own a shirt from Lululemon? No?
No, and
Didn't think so.
That kind of goes to the point I was trying to make earlier, though, how Lululemon's kind of backed into this corner with their niche. It is very much a women's brand for leisure wear. And you're right, they are trying to grow out of that into menswear. And again, to their credit, their online sales have been ticking up pretty consistently over the last couple of quarters. Like, they're doing things right, but it's tough to have that conversation. I'm not going to walk into a Lululemon on my own and buy sweatpants there. That's just, it's not.
Girlfriend's going to have to drag you in
It's
there.
not my brand. It is my girlfriend's brand or your wife's brand or your daughter's brand, whatever. And as for Under Armour, they don't really have that. They have that sort of leisure wear as a sports sort of market, and they actually have so much more room to grow in several markets. Like their footwear has been outstanding for Under Armour these last couple of quarters. We got Stephen Curry, who's just been phenomenal and is their biggest brand ambassador. His footwear line is selling hand over foot. Their footwear segment grew 64% year over year this past year. They've got new launches of smart running shoes, new golf shoes with Jordan Spieth as their spokesperson. So I think Under Armour, like I said before, has a lot of different directions it can grow. Lululemon, not nearly as many, and that worries me.
Yeah, so in their latest report, Vince, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. They said they want to double sales by 2020. My eyebrows popped at that. Mark here's not buying it. I mean, they can maybe sell to a bunch of men. Like, is this possible? They want to double sales by opening stores and stuff.
Yeah, but keeping in mind what you guys said in terms of the market being really crowded, I will not deny that, especially in the athleisure segment, within, call it sporting apparel overall. Definitely getting very crowded. I understand that. But Lululemon's footprint is still quite small, 350 stores. Mostly concentrated in the U.S. at that.
Right.
They're seeing, you mentioned men's growth as being a big driver for them, but also international growth is a big driver for them. So I think that's very ambitious on their part. But at the same time, there's also some longer term trends, like in terms of demographics that are benefiting them as well. So Morgan Stanley, again, had this report talking about just sporting retail, about how the fact that in North America, for example, high school sports participation is up 10% or from 25% to 35% over the past 35 years, and especially with girls, which benefits Lululemon, participation's doubled from 17% to 30% over the same period. Then you keep in mind the fact that, U.S. professional sports leagues, their studies say that interest in their product, their sports, is very much tied to the fact that the consumers participate when they were younger. So that kind of doubles up, right, as it goes through time. Yeah. And Latin America, super low penetration. So does that benefit an Under Armour more so? Probably, because the premium prices aren't going to work as well in some of these emerging markets.
Right.
But overall, I think that with China, for example, another big growth area for both of these companies, and the fact that the government there is actually pushing its citizens into healthier lifestyles and to be active, because they basically want a next generation of highly competitive athletes to participate in.
Are they actually telling them to work out?
They're very much pushing them.
Big
to
Brother's
a
telling
lifestyle.
You to work out,
and I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I think
yeah.
So, that is a nice push to have when basically you think about basketball. The number of people who play basketball in China is absurd per day. It's hundreds of millions. So when you have a market that size, I see the competition, of course, just being the fact that the market is so strong that people want to get into this business.